Hey everybody, Matt Barton here with this week's Broker Minute or Two. Um, Dual agency, limited agency is very beneficial in some situations, but I wanted to take that a little bit further today and talk about limited agency versus an unrepresented buyer and the pros and the cons. So I'm going to start with this. I get asked all the time, are there states that don't allow dual agency? And in fact, there are. There's 9 of them currently that do not allow dual agency. And I've mentioned this before to a few people in the company that there has been some discussions in Utah to do away with dual agency. The variation on that is that at the agent level, dual agency potentially could go away, but it would still be allowable at the broker level. So just something to anticipate and look forward to. My experience is you have initial discussions and then the discussions get louder and bigger, and then eventually a decision is made. So it's not a foregone conclusion, but just know that 9 states have it, made it illegal to do. And because the argument is, can you really look out for the best interests of both parties when you're doing a transaction? I'm not here to debate that. I actually think it can be done, but I can also see the concerns. All right, so having said that, let's take a look at the forms. This is the unrepresented buyer disclosure. So if you're not going to, let's say you have a listing, right? And somebody comes and says, hey, I'm really interested in the house. I don't have an agent. So we have 2 options. We can represent both sides if our seller is okay with that. Or we can say, you know what? I can help you with the transaction. You will not be my agent. We will have a document that will affirmatively declare that I am not your agent or the company has any agency in place. And if they're okay with that, then we can go forward and represent them. Now, the upside to that is half of our risk just went away, right? When we're only representing one side. And our brokerage fee in our ERS says that if somebody finds interest in the property, the brokerage fee in its totality is owed. We have a subsection that talks about BAC, and that's if there's a conditional. If somebody through the MLS brings a qualified buyer, then it's agreed upon by the seller to take some of the total brokerage commission and pay it to the other broker. But if that doesn't come into play, if that condition of if is not met, then the total amount goes to the company and to you as our agent. All right. So the key parts on this are, I love it when we have documents like this and people still don't pay attention when something is in all caps and bolded, right? So this paragraph, I'm not going to read all of this document, but when you enter into a discussion with a real estate agent regarding a potential real estate transaction, you should from the outset understand who the real estate agent is representing in that transaction. What follows is a brief but very important explanation regarding the agency relationships and the real estate agents involved in this transaction. It goes on to talk about a seller's agent, it talks about a buyer's agent, and it talks about the potential of an agent representing both sides. But you know what? All of those 3 sections are irrelevant because this last paragraph says, okay, now that you know what the possibilities are, you are going to now confirm by signing this document that you're not going to have an agent. You are an official unrepresented buyer, that you're aware you could have gone these routes and you chose not to. That may not seem like a big deal, but it really is, especially if things go sideways. And then it goes on to talk about, by signing this disclosure, you acknowledge and agree that the company is only going to represent the seller. So it reiterates it, and then signatures, right? So that's good information. And there are benefits to that. Now, listen, I get it. Some other agents say, well, you know what? I want to have the transaction count. I want to be able to show that for an award. I want to be able to tout it in my listing presentations that I've closed this many sides. Totally get that. If that's what how you market yourself and it's important, then, the limited agency is probably the route you're going to go. And I will put one big asterisk with that, if that's what your seller wants. We don't do what we want. We do what is in the best interest of our clients. So assuming your seller says, yeah, I can see the real advantages of representing both sides versus an unrepresented buyer, then yes, you could and should pursue this. So let's look at the limited agency consent document. Again, here's something in all bold, all capped, right? So that tends to mean, I don't know, in the world I live in, that means that's important. And so it should be important for a client. And I would dare say that if we're presenting this document to a client, rather than just sending it over via DigiSign and say, hey, sign this, you might want to take at least the time to be like, hey, this is what limited agency is. I would like you to read this whole document in case you have any questions, but at a minimum, you should be reading this open paragraph that kind of summarizes the whole document, right? So it then goes on to talk about the principal or the branch broker, the agents representing both sides, and then we get into that discussion of the seller's agent versus the buyer's agent, right? And what limited agency is. And so this part I do want to read. The first part before this red however, bring this higher up on my screen, is what I have found most agents say, and they kind of stop here. A limited agent has fiduciaries to both the buyer and the seller. Yeah, that just doesn't quite cut it. And look, in the actual document, it says however, so there's something important that follows. However, those duties are limited because the agent cannot provide to both parties undivided loyalty, full confidentiality, full disclosure of all the information known to the agent. For this reason, a limited agent must remain neutral, right? And then further says may not disclose to either party information likely to weaken the bargaining position of the other. But if you are aware of something on either side that could materially affect the property, like something that wasn't disclosed in seller's disclosures, you're obligated to tell the other side. So then they have the choice, right? And this is where we help them as an agent. If you're buying a listing from another agent in our company, then you're going to choose option B. And I'm the only one as principal broker who is limited. The agents are not limited. But if it is your listing and you have the buyer, then you're going to check box A. So I hope that's helpful, because I've had this question quite a bit of why would I ever do an unrepresented buyer, right? Why wouldn't I do limited agency? So coming full circle, what I'd say to that is because your seller may not want to do limited agency, right? I don't know. There's a novel question to ask. And if you're just from the world I live in, anytime I can reduce risk, I typically do that. And so the unrepresented buyer disclosure is certainly a route that reduces the amount of risk attached to a transaction. I hope that helps you in your business. And now you can give a better explanation when you're talking to your clients about either one of those forms. All right, we will talk to you soon.